Let's talk about boxes. This is a recent build, and it happened to be one of my favorite. It was a Farmer Bill hatchet box, kind of cool. I put these wings on it, put one of my bass super necks on it, and made a bass. I was pretty pleased with it. Sounded pretty good. Had a couple guys play it. Sounded all right. One day I picked it up and I strummed it, and I had fret buzz everywhere. Couldn't figure out what was going on. It was adjusted before and it was working fine, but now all of a sudden it doesn't. So I had to take some time and I had to look it over and see what was going on. I thought maybe I needed to adjust the bridge. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that the top of the box basically caved in. It's a very thin box, and I had put some reinforcements in there, but I hadn't put enough reinforcements in. So the purpose of this video is to talk a little bit about reinforcing boxes. It's one of the things I've learned a lot of it the hard way, but I've learned about reinforcing my boxes and getting them solid and making them work and making them hold the tension of the strings. If you remember from an earlier video, I talked about the string tension that you'll run into. Here's a listing of kind of typical string tension. That's the cumulative amount of tension from all the strings. As you saw at the top, a ukulele doesn't have much tension. They're nylon strings. That's only with those 4 strings, about 33 pounds. Now that's still something, but it's not a lot. Then as you work down, a 3-string guitar's about 55. 4-string cigar box is about 75. If you get into a 6-string guitar, you're looking at about 115 pounds of tension. And what that really means is once you take the box, you put the nut and the tuners on one end, you have the bridge on the other end, and as you crank them, they want to kind of come together. You're actually jacking those two parts together. So you have to be stout enough and stiff enough to withstand all of that tension. Mandolin gets up, because it has 8 strings, to about 176 pounds. And then the bass, the one I just looked at, that's almost 180 pounds. That's a lot of tension. And if the box is not rigid enough, it'll pull it into a different shape. And so some of the things I've learned, again, the hard way, is how to reinforce these boxes. And we have a lot of different boxes, a lot of different quality levels. Some are really unbelievably stout and stiff. They have a lot of structure to them. And as they are, they're pretty solid. For example, this Atabey box, if you take a look at it and you look at the inside, you can see how thick the walls are in that box. It's really stiff. And if you put it together and you secure the top to the box, it's a really solid structure. Some of the other ones that we have are something as simple as like these Brick House, one of my favorite boxes. This is one that I have that I'm making into a ukulele. And because the top overhangs the box and the collar on the inside, when you glue this together, you have a really, really solid structure. So I like these. They're nice, solid structure. They work really well. And then, of course, there's other kinds of boxes. One that's really popular are these Padron boxes. A lot of them out there. My local store, they sell a lot of these cigars. So in the empty bin, I find a lot of these. Again, a pretty good box. Has the box joints, which make it pretty strong. The top overhangs the box. This part here is called the collar. If you glue that up, you're going to have a pretty solid structure. So those are great boxes. A lot of other ones that you see that are really popular. This one happens to be a favorite. A lot of people like this. This is a Camacho. This is one of their highly lacquered boxes. It's made of a pressed paper that's covered with a wood veneer, but this is a really, really solid box as well. Works out really well. So when I'm looking at a box, I'm trying to imagine all of this weight and this stress, and I need to know if it's stiff enough. Now, again, as we've talked earlier, there's a number of ways you can go with a neck. There's the neck through design, and then there's the bolt-on necks. And you have to kind of take in consideration how you're going to build it and what you need to do. This one happens to be a sample, an example of a bolt-through neck. Again, I took the box off, and so all you're seeing is a top and the neck. You can see the tail runs all the way through the box. You're securing the bridge right around there. So it's a pretty solid structure. When you're using the neck through designs, I find that the boxes don't have to be as stiff and as solid as when you're using the bolt-on neck. Again, this is the way I like to build a lot of my instruments. I use these bolt-on necks. It's a neck with a hanger bolt. But you see, I have a lot of reinforcement in here. You can see that I've reinforced the bottom, the top ends of the box. I also put my plate in there because I know that's where I'm going to mount the bridge. So this becomes a really, really solid structure. So a lot of things I do when I reinforce them is I add some material. And laying around my shop and probably around your shop, I've got a lot of scraps of, this happens to be 3/8 plywood. I use a lot of that to do the reinforcement. One of the other things is you probably have access to a lot of cigar boxes, and you maybe have a lot laying around. You can actually take them apart, and there's some pretty solid wood that you can cut and fit and do the reinforcements. I simply use just some normal Titebond glue and put a clamp on there and get it nice and solid. So now I have a nice solid structure, and it works out really, really well. You also have to keep in mind that sometimes you have unique situations. This one is not a cigar box. It happens to be a whiskey box that I've modified. I built a couple of instruments out of this, and it works out really well. Well, these slide tops kind of create a little bit of a problem on trying to get it all together because the way it slides in there, you can't mount the components to there. So what I've done on these in the past is I've actually put a block on the inside that's tall enough that reaches up through this. And so when I slide it in, I can screw the bridge and it'll go into the other part that I've already put in there. So lots of different ideas, lots of different ways to look at it. You need to figure out how to reinforce them. When I get done with it, before I get ready to kind of close it up, this is kind of an example where you can see I've got the plate in here for the bridge, and I screw the bridge into it, put the other components in there, and now this box will be stiff enough. One of the things I do is, and I've seen it happen a lot, it's happened to me a lot of times, is you'll notice that sometimes, again, you got the neck on here, you got the tuners up here, you're tightening it up, and what it's doing is it's trying to pull it this way, it's actually pulling it down. And a lot of times what will happen is the box will start to creep open on the back end. I do a lot, I have on a lot of occasions, seems to work out really well, that when I get it put together and get the box, and these are, again, one of my favorite boxes, what I have is I have two small screws down here that I actually screw the top to the box. So now that's secure. So even though it's pulling on it, it's not going to pull and open up the box. One of the things that I use a lot of small screws. One of the places I get them from is called the Bolt Depot. It's actually boltdepot.com. And they really have a nice selection of smaller screws. This is actually a number 4 by about 1 inch. So I use a lot of these. I buy a lot of them. And I'm not opposed to taking the screws and actually putting them in the top. If they're done nice and done correctly, they don't look too bad. Sometimes you can come in from the backside. So again, the idea is that when you're building these boxes, think about the fact that when you put the neck on there and you tighten up those strings, it's going to want to take that box in a different direction. So you have to have the box secured. I like to reinforce it. Sometimes I screw the top down. There's a lot of different ways to make it a solid structure. See you in the next video.